when I was out in Arizona, I got a copy of that law. It was published in the newspaper, and I read it, and it mirrors federal law in the first place. I mean, it doesn't require anything more of a legal non-citizen than does the federal law. The federal law requires that a legal non-citizen, somebody with a visa or a green card or something of that sort, carry evidence of his legal status with him at all times and produce it upon demand. And the Arizona law goes no further.
It goes no further, and in fact, then it seems to turn, the judgment of it seems to turn on an understanding of what is reasonable suspicion. And they wrote the law so that there had to be a lawful contact with an individual by law enforcement before they could exercise the judgment on reasonable suspicion. And stop, detention, or arrest. So that excludes someone from walking down the street looking like they happen to be Hispanic and being targeted. And by the way, we don't have a problem in Arizona today. They aren't pointing their fingers at Arizona law enforcement officers and accusing them of discriminating against people on race. Well, ACLU is pointing to Joe Arpaio. But that's more a political maneuver than it is anything that has to do with real incidents. So if there's not a problem in Arizona today, why would there be a problem after the law is enacted? I happen to have written the reasonable suspicion law for Iowa, and when I was in the state senate there, for their workplace drug testing law. And it doesn't require a law enforcement officer. It requires a trained employee to make that judgment on reasonable suspicion of drug abuse. And we have had since 1998 0 cases litigated against it, and no objections that I know of. Responsible people can handle this. They have for a long time, and we can't have law enforcement unless we have responsible people.
Yes, and the president, as you pointed out, definitely misled the people when he came out with that business about an Hispanic person going out for an ice cream with his child. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
I mean, that's just nonsense.
And that was a way of scaring people. You know, when you look at this administration, I'm offended by Eric Holder and the president also in their posture of this. But it looks like Eric Holder said that we were that white people in America are cowards when it comes to race. And I don't know what the basis of that is, but I'm not a coward when it comes to that, and I'm happy to talk about these things, and I think we should. But the president has demonstrated he's got a default mechanism in him that breaks down the side of race, on the side of it favors the black person. In the case of Professor Gates and Officer Crowley, that was a case where he knew nothing about it, threw himself into it, and concluded that the cop had operated on a race bias or a racist basis, and then he ended up having to have a beer summit because of that. Yeah. And when you've got Eric Holder's office they shut off the most open and shut and the most blatant voter intimidation case in the history of America, and the new Black Panthers case in Philadelphia, where you had paramilitary uniformed people standing there with billy clubs, smacking those billy clubs in their hands and calling white people crackers. That case was done. They had the convictions on it, and he pulled the plug on that. And he can't find a nickel to investigate Acorn. That seems there are racial implications there. And if you can't find a nickel to investigate Acorn, but you can turn the full force of the federal government, the Department of Justice, against Arizona, and neither the president nor the attorney general can point to a single place in the Arizona law that would be a constitutional violation or a preemption from federal statute or case law that would indicate that they're right. And yet still they march on forward, and it clearly is for political reasons. It can't be anything else.